And we now move on to a video session by Bede Draper. Bede Draper is going to be speaking on Swami Dayananda, a living embodiment of the Shankara teaching tradition, which will be in English. Bede Draper is from Australia and has a background in Western philosophy, theology, psychology, and comparative religion. He has a master's in applied science and has formal training in various forms of Western psychotherapy. So let's look at the video.
Well, some of you might be wondering what a Western person like me, what I've got to say about a rather historical figure, Adi Shankara, who started a particular teaching tradition, I think in around about the 8th century. What's that got to do with me, a Western person who lives in Australia? Well, the thing is that it's meaningful for me because I came in a personal and direct contact with this teaching tradition through Puja Swami Dayananda. And what I'd like to talk about is just what Swami Dayananda unfolded as a teaching tradition. Because in the West, we don't have a tradition like this. And I just want to briefly talk about that. Now, first of all, when we look at our human lives, we are enclosed in we're enclosed in a world, normally speaking, that we're aware of what our senses are showing us, so that we're aware of sights and sounds and tastes and touch. We're also aware of physical sensations. We're aware of emotions. And we're aware of thinking processes, concepts and ideas that we have about things. And this fundamentally is what human beings are enclosed in. Normally, their range of knowledge does not go beyond this, kind of like in a fence. And not only that, our sense of ourself, our sense of our identity, what it does, it comes from our experience of ourself. And our experience of ourself is constituted or made up of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and actions. And the thoughts, feelings, sensations, and actions that we've done in the past and things that have happened to us form our sense of who we are. And so when we're looking, we're always looking out at objects. So to ourselves, we become an object. In other words, we have a sense of who I am as a person. I'm this sort of person. And so when you actually ask someone, who do you say you are? Well, I'm Bede, I'm from Australia. You know what I mean? I've got these certain faults. I've got, I'm good at this and I'm not good at that. I've got certain fears. Basically, I'm talking about an object, myself as an object that first of all, I can perceive with my senses. I can think about with my thoughts, and I can describe. But it's more important than that. What happens is that not only do I describe myself, I take myself to be the description of myself. Now, we can see this quite clearly when it comes to if someone calls you an idiot or a fool, or you think that you're an idiot or a fool, you don't just simply have a thought about yourself as a fool. You're actually experiencing yourself as what you're thinking. Like what Swami Dayananda says, you become the thoughts and the thoughts become you. So our sense of being, our sense of life and being, what we do is we take this to be our psychophysical processes. And so what happens is, and that's all it is, and we think that this constitutes our life. We think that this is me and this is my life. In other words, I take my life to be perceptions in terms of the senses. I take my life to be the thinking processes that I engage in, and I take my life to be the emotional reactions or passions that move me. from moment to moment. And I take this to be me. And I don't question this. I can't actually, because I'm enclosed in what Swami Dayananda would say is like an epistemological, the word epistemological means to do knowledge. I'm enclosed in this way of seeing, if you like. And I take everything, this is me, this is my life and my being. Now, in the Hindu tradition, they often use an analogy, and it's called the snake and the rope. Now, what this is that let's imagine that it's a slightly dark room, and there's a rope coiled up in the corner. And then what happens is I look and I suddenly think, oh my goodness, this is a snake. Now, the interesting thing here is this. The actual fact, the actual reality is it's a rope, but I'm enclosed in a way of seeing that I'm absolutely convinced that I am looking at a snake. So I've got a notion in my head, that belongs to me, doesn't belong in the world, it's in my head, and that notion is projected out as an experience. So I'm having an experience of looking at this snake. Now, there's a problem here. And then I'm afraid also, because the way I see, the way I actually see is the way I be. So because I'm seeing a snake, I can't help but be afraid. I can't help but have thoughts like, oh my goodness, I've got to get out of here. I can't help but be saturated with fear of a sense of danger. And I've got an urge to get away from the snake. Now, I could do lots of things with a snake. You know, I could say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn how to meditate so I'm not as afraid of the snake. That's still not going to deal with the snake. I can try and fight the snake by whipping it with a stick. That's still not going to get rid of the snake, because the snake is not real. The snake is a delusion that I am taking to be real. Now this is where we get to the teaching tradition. The teaching tradition of Shankara that was unfolded by Swami Dayananda has this this quality about this specific thing about it. What it does is it frees us from delusion. It frees us from delusion. In other words, and it frees us from delusion by actually enabling us to recognize what really is. To recognize what really is. So here I'm looking at the snake. It seems as if it's a snake. As far as I'm concerned, it is a snake. So here I am, I'm enclosed. I'm enclosed in this delusion. Now, it is not possible for me to get out of the delusion from within the delusion. Something else has to come out from the outside. Okay? Now, the thing is that, and again, if I in the West, for example, in terms of Western psychology, you can try and, you can make me think positive about the snake. You can, you can get me to be in touch with my feelings about my fears about the snake. You can maybe, okay, what you do is if you just go for a walk, maybe you won't be as afraid of the snake. But all of those things do not solve the problem. So the same way, when we look at our identity, who we are, we take ourselves to be an object. And we take ourselves to be an object that we can think about. In fact, we are pretty obsessed about thinking about ourselves as this object. What kind of person am I? How am I doing? How do I look towards other people? So I'm so busy being an object, I'm self-obsessed because I take this object to be very, very important. Because without it, I'm not alive. Because I take this to be my life. Now, into Swami Dayananda. What he had this beautiful gift of doing was he could actually, in one sense, imagine that here you are, you're looking at the snake and, I'm afraid of the snake. Well, what he does, let's just quietly look. Look at this. It seems like there's a snake, but what really is a rope. Now, what happens to the moment I actually see the rope? What happens to that whole experience I'm having of a snake? It disappears. It wasn't got rid of. It wasn't real in the first place. So through an act of knowledge, what happens is my whole experience is transformed, in this case of the snake. But what Swami Dayananda does is this. Just like the snake, we take ourselves, our life and being, to be this psychophysical entity that we take ourselves to be. So what Swami Dayananda, with the teaching tradition, because the teaching tradition is to do with knowledge, to bring about a recognition of what really is. Okay, I take myself to be this psychophysical entity, but the teaching tradition opens up and makes available to us a recognition of ourselves not as this psychophysical entity, but rather that our reality is non-dimensional. It's not actually rooted in space and time. The reality we are, the life and being we are, is God. It's not, it is not anything that we can think about, describe, or see with our senses. It's only something we can be. And this whole, teaching tradition that was started by Adi Shankara, right, was in one sense represented beautifully by the life of Puja Swamiji Dayananda, because he had this gift where he could unfold what we are in reality, what really is what, as opposed to what seems to be. And the way he did this was because this is a teaching tradition which involves coming to a recognition of what really is, which he calls a vision, and then learning to live that vision in our daily life. And this was the magnificence, this is the magnificence of knowledge, because knowledge in the sense that Shankara or Swami Dayananda means it is transformative. It transforms the way we are being. And so it's not like head knowledge. So knowledge is not like, some people take, for example, Vedanta as an intellectual scholastic subject. Some people take it as an experience, something that's going to happen to me. But for Swami Dayananda, knowledge is the coming alive in you of a recognition of what is that frees you from what seems to be. And without Adi Shankara, we wouldn't have the teaching tradition. I would never, as a Westerner, have met this most extraordinary Vedanta teacher who belonged to the teaching that was initiated by Shankara. And for that, I'm truly grateful.
Thank you, Bede, for this warm and affectionate presentation on Puja Swamiji. He was also my guru, and I thank him for this wonderful talk. Thank you all for attending this particular session. And the next session is at 6:30 a.m. IST. It is Gita Bhashyam by Shri K. Aravindarao Garu, followed by a video session by J. Srinivas Garu on the importance of karma to achieve moksha. That should be interesting. Hope to see you all back here again. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.